for joining us at Unveil with Akinyi, where we help understand self and others, and also in the journey of understanding loss and grief. And today we shall be looking at culture and loss and grief. You know, culture is basically a way of doing things as influenced by communities, influenced by our tribes, influenced by the society, influenced by our nationalities. And one thing we all can attest to is that different cultures all experience loss. Loss perhaps of tradition, loss of life, loss of values. So even as a people, culturally, we experience loss. Things to note about culture and loss and grief is that, first is that different cultures acknowledge different losses. What one culture may acknowledge as a loss, perhaps from another culture, it's a way of life. Cultures have time attributed to grieving, and these times differ. Others, perhaps, it's a short time, and others, it's a long time. But one thing stands is that there is a time for grieving. One thing we notice that there's also a support system when it comes to our culture and when it comes to grieving. And this support system can be with this person, can be around for a designated set of time, but they come to support and acknowledge that this is no longer there. One thing we need to note as individuals is that the way our culture handles loss and grief is different from way even us as individuals we handle loss and grief. And sometimes there can be a conflict when you come from a culture where that perhaps expects you to grieve quickly or perhaps expects you to prolong the grief. But as an individual, maybe you have already embarked on the grieving process and maybe you're also grieving differently. Remember, we are all different. So we need to also be aware on our cultural influences and what our culture has taught us in relation to loss and grief. Has it influenced the way as an individual you are grieving? So I'd like to ask, in your culture, how do you embrace or how do you deal with loss and grief? And does your culture support your personal grieving process?